When I Dream. This is a game that came out some time ago. It is not a super new game, but only recently did I pick up a copy and I decided to give it a try. This is a game of secret identities and of creative communications. The game is divided in rounds. Each round the player will be the dreamer and will be wearing this fancy mask. Also, warning, don't stare too much at the spiral here, or I don't want to hypnotize you inadvertently. So one player will be the dreamer, and there will be a dream on the table. We'll see now what that means. Some players will try to help the dreamer figure out what the dream is. Some other players will mislead the dreamer, and some other players will try to keep the balance in the force. And also, we'll see in a little bit what that means. Each round, a player will be the dreamer, will wear the mask, and will try to understand the subject that is on the card on top of this stack of cards here. These cards are double-sided, and each side has two subjects, one on top, one on the bottom. So when you are shuffling these cards, you should just try to turn them in all possible directions to ensure maximum randomization. When you're satisfied, you place this game piece here on top of the card so that only one of the two subjects is visible. Then you give each player an identity card, and how many people receive and which ones they receive exactly depends on a number of players, so that you can ensure a good mix. Some player will be fairies, some players will be boogeyman, and some players will be sandmans. The fairies will try to help the dreamer to get to figure out the subject of the card. The boogeyman will try to mislead the dreamer, and the sandman will try to keep balance, and I'll explain later what that means. So once everybody has their identity, which remains a secret, you look at it and then you put it face down. You're ready to start. You start the timer, and then while the timer is going, each player going around will give a one-word clue to the dreamer. And again, if you're a fairy, you're trying to help the dreamer. If you're a boogeyman, you're trying to mislead them. So hell is the subject here, and suppose I'm a fairy and I say punishment. And then the next player says religion, and the next player says torment or whatever, devils. Imagine these players are all fairies. And then the boogeyman says something that is supposed to mislead that. At some point, the dreamer will try to guess. If the dreamer guessed right, hell, the card is placed on this side of the board here, as you can see where there's a fairy. And then we start again, this time with musician. And if the player gets it wrong, it says, okay, pink flamingo. Oh, that was wrong. So we put it on this side. Now we have tractor, that was guessed correctly. Gondola, nope, the guy said zebra. What? Omelette, no, the player said trolfamador. Chili, that was guessed right, etc., etc., etc. And you continue like this until the timer is out. At that point, the dreamer will have a chance of scoring action. You will see what that means, basically by trying to retell the dream. Basically, the dreamer will tell a story in which they will try to incorporate as many of the cards, of the guesses that they made. Oh yeah, I was riding on a zebra going through the pits of hell, and I ate some chili, etc., etc., and I saw a pink flamingo, etc., etc., etc. Because the dreamer will score some extra points if the dreamer mentions all of the cards that they guessed right. And that's important because, well, those extra points. But trust me, as the dreamer has been trying to figure out these subjects, paying attention to that element of the game, it can be quite tricky to then recall exactly the cards that were the guesses that the dreamer produced. Then we score points. The fairies will score a point for each side, for each card that was guessed. The boogeyman will score a point for each card that was not guessed, so that resulted in a wrong guess. The Sandman score in a funny way, which is why I have not explained that element yet. Here's the Sandman. Because basically they'll score very well, they get a lot of points if the two stacks have the same or similar amounts of cards. So if a lot of cards are here, the Sandman is going to try to mislead the Dreamer. If a lot of cards are on the wrong side, the Sandman is going to try to help the Dreamer. If there is an equal number of cards in both stacks, then the Sandman's score that number of cards, in this case would be 3 and 3, plus 2 points. If there is a difference of 1, say in 3 and 2, the Sandman will score 1 point for each card in the biggest stack. If there is a difference of 2 or more, like here 3 and 1, the Sandman will score a point for each card in the smallest stack. So in this case, they only score 1 point. And again, this is why the Sandman are trying to keep the two stacks as similar to one another as possible. So you determine how many points fairies, Boogeyman and Sandman score. You assign them these tokens to keep track of the score. Each player will be the Dreamer once, and at that point the player with the most points wins the game. This game has been a real surprise. When I read the rules, I thought that's gonna be an interesting, entertaining, light filler. It looks pretty, so that's good too. It turned out to be a lot more engaging, a lot more fun and exciting than I ever expected, and I loved that. As the fairies, you have an interesting task, but as I will say later, the other roles are even more fun. But I don't want to disparage the fairies, because being a fairy is good. You still have to perform the task, which seems easy to help the Dreamer guess. And sometimes the Dreamer is not getting it, and you're just there challenging yourself. What can I say that is so insightful that I can in one word convey important things? And sometimes you get a sense of who the other fairies are, but they may be doing a bad job, and now you're trying to fix whatever misapprehension they may be given to the Dreamer. The Boogeyman is interesting because it's a tricky job. Well, misleading seems easy, but of course, if the fairies had formed a clear pattern, say again, it was hell, and then said, you know, religion, punishment, devil, and you say gelato, that you stand out too much. So the interesting thing to me as the Boogeyman is when you're trying to hijack a pattern. You're trying to figure out the pattern that the fairies are creating, and see if you can add something that is compatible with those, so you don't stand out as the Boogeyman, but at the same time leads the other player astray. And say maybe it's about, I don't know, the desert, and then they're saying stuff like hot and sand, etc., etc. And then you say, well, volleyball, and then instead of desert, maybe the other player now is suddenly thinking about beach. That kind of stuff is really fun. The Boogeyman is another tricky role because you're switching one way or another, and you know, one role you started acting as the Boogeyman, and then the Dreamer's not trusting you anymore, but then you start acting as the fairy, and it's a problem that the Dreamer is not trusting you, because of course the Dreamer has a lot of work to do. That, mind you, is also an incredibly fun game because you have a lot of stuff to do. You're trying to guess the card, and you're trying to guess who is trying to help you and who is trying to mislead you. You're also trying not to forget what you're saying, and again, it seems such a simple task, but I've seen Dreamers not being able to recall anything but the last guess that they made. And some of the dreams, yes, you're just trying to stick all of those words in a single sentence, but the result sometimes is hilarious. It's just a little extra thing that, well, first makes the role of the Dreamer different from the fairy, otherwise they would just be scoring exactly the same, simply by how many cards have been guessed. But it just adds a little bit of zany, surreal entertainment to the game. So I was very, very pleased, and in my group everybody enjoyed it because all roles are fun. The game stays fresh because you get different identities, and once you're in the game, you're also the dreamer. So you're constantly doing different things. The rules are very simple, really intuitive, and you will have a lot of happy little accidents, again, miscommunications, or crazy insights that nobody expected. So fun stuff will happen because the players will bring their creativity, their ideas to the game, and the game really is a nice interface that allows these ideas to interact, to bump against each other, and to create funny serendipitous combinations. So When I Dream, really fun game, really enjoyable, easy to play, and I think a true crowd pleaser because I think it can really appeal to a lot of different types of gamers, including to non-gamers at all. It can be a party game, you play with people that never played a game, and I think they still can have a lot of fun because this is a fun game.